All right, well, here we go. So, at this point, right now, I want to talk just a few minutes about the Carson and Colorado Railroad, which we right about where that sign is over here. That tells us that this sign is coming. Is about where the C&C went across the highway there. So, what occurred was this: in the 1860s, you've got Cerro Gordo down south of here. Anybody go to Cerro Gordo yesterday?
Yeah.
Yep. Did anybody make it out?
Yeah.
Did anybody burn up their car?
One did.
I know. That's too bad. That sucks. That's too bad. That's too bad. Yeah. Ah, boy, howdy. Yeah, I heard that. For all these years, we were talking last night, some of the ex-head abbots, we've really never had on these trips, amazingly, we've never had a lot of real big problems until yesterday.
All the problems.
So maybe we're good for the next 15 years. Yeah, wouldn't like that when I was at Abbott.
There you go.
So, you had the activity at Cerro Gordo, you had Darwin going on up over there, that way, and so on. It was decided that you also had activity in a place called Candelaria in Nevada, and south of there, another place called Silver Peak. And so it was decided that it would be a good idea to run a railroad from the area around Carson City, Virginia City, down south through the western portion of Nevada to service those mines over there in that part of Nevada. And so in 1880, the Carson and Colorado Railroad was established. It was incorporated in 1880, and the idea was that it would run from Mound House, Nevada, which is right near Virginia City, and it would eventually go somehow or other, in a way that nobody ever figured out, it would go to the Colorado River. It never made it to the Colorado River. But, in fact, here's what happened. As they were building the railroad south towards Candelaria, the mines started to peter out. And it's like, oh my gosh, we don't really have that much activity going on. We need this railroad to make some money. And just at about that time, you started to get more and more farming and mining activity here in the Owens Valley. So originally the route was going to go south through the western part of Nevada. What they decided to do was north and east of where Benton Hot Springs is. You guys know where Benton is? Mm-hmm. But still on the Nevada side, it was decided to run a spur line down to Candelaria because that was still producing. And then instead of running down the west side of Nevada, they'd come down the east side of California. And because you have a pass there, Montgomery Pass, it's I wouldn't call it gentle, but it's more gentle than like Westgard Pass, which is just to the east, right up the hills there. It was a fairly easy way to get over into the Owens Valley to serve. You already had Bishop was already here. You already had Lone Pine, Independence, and so on, as communities that were just getting started, and agriculture that was just getting started as well. So they started to build over Montgomery Pass and then down through the east side of the Owens Valley. They hit Benton, they hit Laws. They came right through here, and the side of the stop that was here, which was about, you got 3 signs right here. Second one is one of those diamond-shaped signs, and then the third one is the sign that's telling you how far to go to Westgard Pass. About where that sign is where Zurich Station was, and so there was a station house there, and the reason they called it Zurich is because if you look at the mountains there, it reminded people of Zurich in Switzerland, the Alps and that kind of stuff, right? So there was a station, there was a platform there was a station there, and the rails continued on. They kept building and building, and the idea was that they would eventually, they got rid of the idea of the Colorado River, but they kept the name in the name of the railroad. They kept building south, and eventually they had the idea that, well, the nearest railroad outlet to the south is down there in Mojave. The Southern Pacific goes through Mojave. So they figured they would run the rails all the way down and join up with the Mojave. So now you've got a complete circuit all the way from the Transcontinental Railroad that goes through Reno down by the Virginia and Truckee to Mound House, and then the Carson and Colorado down here. And then you could service the whole Owens Valley, and you have an outlet to the south and an outlet to the north. So they got as far as Keeler. Yeah, you guys, if you went to Cerro Gordo, you started there right near Keeler. And Keeler had served the mines at Cerro Gordo. Swansea was right there, which also served the mines at Cerro Gordo. So there's a lot of activity there, plus the stuff up in the nearby area, Darwin and so on. And so they got the railroad down there, and the executives came along and, to go on a trip and see how this thing's doing, see how the construction's going. So they set up a special, and they ran the executives all the way down the Keeler. And the railroad president comes out and he looks around. We either built this railroad 300 miles too short or 300 years too soon. We're going to stop here. And it was a narrow gauge railroad too. So that kind of makes it difficult, because eventually, even if they did build a Mojave, you'd have to take all that freight off the narrow gauge and transfer it onto standard gauge of Mojave. Yeah. So it ended there at Keeler. Did you guys see the station house there? So there's a bitchin' station house there, both for the station and the passenger and freight, and the platform and all that is right there. And there's a Slim Princess monument there as well. But that would give you an idea of this. That's like the typical Southern Pacific station design. And there was that one. There was one at Oweno. There was one at Lone Pine. The one here at Zurich, I don't believe it was quite that. It wasn't as big as the one at Keeler. And I think it was torn out I just read a book about this. It was a really cool book called The Jawbone Branch. And it mostly focuses on the railroad that eventually was built from Mojave almost to Lone Pine, to Oweno. Anyway, the railroad was nicknamed the Slim Princess because it was a narrow gauge railroad, ran a number of steam locomotives back and forth from I think it was finished about 1883, all the way up until 1960. So it ran almost a century, and it served the communities along here. But it also kind of pissed people off, because if you look at the way the railroad ran, and there's a map of it in your history book, it didn't actually go to Bishop. It didn't go to Big Pine, it didn't go to Independence, and it didn't go to Lone Pine. It went outside of those communities by up to 5 or 6 miles. So if you came down on a passenger, on a mixed consist train that had a passenger car on it, and you wanted to go to Lone Pine, it didn't go to Lone Pine, it went near Lone Pine. So you had to get off and then ride horse and wagon into Lone Pine. And then when you wanted to leave, you had to do the same thing over again. So it worked for all those years, serving the mines, serving the farmers, serving some of the passengers along the route. Well, what eventually happened was the mines at Candelaria kind of finally gave out. And they started to, what they were going to do first is that they were going to standardize, they were going to standard gauge the line. They had planned all the way down to Keeler, but they only got as far as I recollect, a little place called Mina, which is in western Nevada. And there, in about 1906, 1907, 1908, you had a bunch of excitement just to the south of there, at Tonopah, at Goldfield, at Rhyolite. If you've ever been to any of those places, yeah. The dam guys, the Dembelican brothers, just had their assemblage in Goldfield, Nevada last month, and we went up to Tonopah, and there were several lines serving that area, and they came and connected. I might get this name wrong, so you might have to I think it was the Tonopah and Goldfield that went up and connected with the Carson in Colorado. So you could, back in those days, back around 1908, you could get on a train, let's say in Los Angeles, you get on the Santa Fe, you could go to Ludlow, California, get off the Santa Fe, get on the Tonopah and Tidewater, get up to Beatty, Nevada area to Rhyolite, get on the Goldfield and Tonopah, go up to Mina, and then get on the Carson in Colorado and come right back down here. But it would only get you to Keeler at that point. Okay, or you could go all the way up to the Transcontinental. You could go west to San Francisco or east to Chicago if you wanted to, or New York, the other side of the country. So there was just so much railroad activity back at the in the early part of the 20th century. Okay, so the thing ends there at Keeler, right? Well, in 1913, the LA Aqueduct was opened. They started building it around 1907, 1908. I might have that year off a little bit, but in that period of time. So they need a railroad to get the supplies out to the aqueduct area there in the desert. So they built LA, what's now the Department of Water and Power. I think back then it was just called the Water Department. Contracted with Southern Pacific to build a line to service the aqueduct, and at the same time there was activity at Trona, and so what eventually happened was that one fly.
Yeah, he likes you.
Yeah. What eventually happened was a line was built from Mojave out to the north of Randsburg and Johannesburg, and then it curved around the El Paso Mountains, and then pretty much parallel 395 to Oweno, right, which is just to the other side of Lone Pine. So you had this interchange at Oweno of the Carson and Colorado narrow gauge and the Southern Pacific, the Jawbone branch of the Southern Pacific standard gauge. So the trains, if you wanted to say you're going to bring a load of apples from Manzanar, before it was a prison camp, to LA, you'd have to put them on the C&C, and then you'd go to Oweno. Then you'd have a bunch of freight handlers take dollies and move the crates of apples over to the boxcar for the Southern Pacific to go to Mojave, and then finally down to Los Angeles. So it was a lot of work. At any rate, as mining activity in western Nevada started to decline, there was less and less and less need for the Carson and Colorado. And so by this time it was owned by the Southern Pacific. It was decided to cut the service and pick up the rails first from Mound House, as I recall, from Mound House down to around Mina, and then they abandoned the section from there over Montgomery Pass to Benton. Then finally Benton to Laws was closed off. So all you had was this island of narrow gauge track between Laws and Keeler, which kept running a couple of steam locomotives, including the number 9, which is up at Laws now, and the number 18. Those ran until the mid-50s, and finally, by the 50s, as you probably know if you look at railroading stuff, by the 50s everybody's going to diesel locomotives. A lot easier to maintain, a lot less hassle than a steam locomotive. And so those steam locomotives were retired, and the Southern Pacific bought a narrow gauge diesel electric locomotive. They called it the Little Giant, and that's what ran the rails until, I want to say, April of 1960, I think, was the, as I recall, I guess I could look it up here. April of 1960 was the last run of the Carson in Colorado. Then the tracks were taken up the next year for scrap. The Southern Pacific took and gave the number 9 to Laws, and they gave the number 18 to the town of Independence to put in the park. And the 18 sat there for years. I mean, you could go up, it was right by the highway in that little park there. There's the number 18. And then I guess in the early 2000s, there was a group that incorporated called the Carson and Colorado Railway as a nonprofit, and they started restoration on the number 18. And they got, I'm going to find out where they got the grants and all that kind of stuff, because it's that's not cheap. They got their boiler certified around, I think, 2006, 2007. And then I think it was in 2015, 2016, they got it on the tracks and got it operational. And they brought it up to Laws and it ran back. I got to ride on a train behind the number 18. We went a quarter mile in one direction and a quarter mile in the other. But it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So sometimes it sits down there on display. They've had it out for in Durango, on the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railway. In fact, it was on one of those runs that it blew a piston. And when it blew, that was spectacular. Those pistons are this big around, and it just blew the whole top end of the piston right out. And they had to, they're out of luck, and all the passengers are looking, well, it's going to be a while. They finally got it back, and it's been repaired, I understand. Where it is now, I think, I'm not sure where it is right now, but there's an engine house at the museum in Independence that was built, and usually resides there for display. But again, it's used in different things, for different things. They had a big steam kind of roundup a few years back in Carson City, and I think it made an appearance there and rode the rails there for a little bit as well. But it's narrow gauge, so you can't just
Limited,
we'll
yeah.
just plop it on the rails and zoom it up to where, like the Union Pacific Big Boy, when they take it on a trip, they just put it on the regular old, mainline railroad because it's standard gauge. But this is narrow gauge, so it makes it a little bit more complicated. You got to truck it to where the narrow gauge rails are, and then take it on that. Okay, cool stuff. The CNC is bitching. The old railroad history of California and Nevada, in the desert railroading, I think is just bitching. I tell my students that, yeah, there was a time you could just make a big old circle just on the railroad, about 100 years ago, even 100 years ago right now in 1924. The TNT was still running, the CNC was still running, the Jawbone was still running. Those other railroads were still going. I think the Bullfrog and Tonopah was still going. I think that might have, I would have to look that up. But you could make that whole circuit back then. But one last little thing about that Jawbone cutoff. They stopped running that in, I think the last trains ran through there in the 80s. I remember as a kid, my folks had a place in Mammoth. We'd come up from LA, and I remember seeing flat cars, box cars and stuff, parked in sidings along 395 along the main line, the Jawbone line there. The rails were still there, I remember in the early 90s. Like just the other side of Little Lake, there was a railroad crossing there. And I remember that into the 90s before they finally tore that up. But if you ever saw Spencer Tracy movie called Bad Day
at Bad Rock.
at Bad
Yep.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about,
Bad
right?
Rock, yep.
The opening of the film has a Southern Pacific passenger train. I think it's painted in what's called the Black Widow paint scheme, and that you see the trains running along, and you can clearly see the mountains just to the south of us down there. You can see the foothills of the Sierras there. You can see where Little Lake is. You can see all that stuff because if you've driven the 395 a lot, I know right where that is. And what it was done is they took a helicopter, and because when you see it, you're right at the nose of the locomotive, and then it pans away. What they did was they took the helicopter and flew it towards the locomotive and then over it, and then reversed the film. And then at the end, okay, so the train's running northbound. It drops off Spencer Tracy at Bad Rock or whatever it's called. And then all the stuff happens. And then a day or two later, it's time for him to come home. The train's going the opposite direction. Well, there's nowhere to turn the train. So it just ends at Oweno. There's no why. There's no turn to how they do that. Same thing. Reverse the film, so it makes it look like it's going southbound instead of northbound. All right. So the next stop is up here. Okay.
Didn't even have time to drink a beer?
Okay, grab a beer and come on over. I'll tell you what Wayne told me to tell you. He told me this is full of beer.
That's full of what he is. Shit.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you right off, I don't know much about this. Wayne asked me to do this trip and gave me the book yesterday, which is cool because I used to do that when I was at Avenue sometimes. Not as much as scuba craft, but anyway. So we're in Marble Canyon in an area called the Magpie Group of Mines, and from what Wayne's got down here, this was placer mining. So the source of the gold is probably upstream somewhere. I don't know how they did it, and when I talk to my students about mining and all that in my environmental science class, I tell them, I guess you just had to have a trained eye, because some of these outcrops, not these ones, I don't think, would be quartz, and they would have, the gold is intermeshed with the quartz, and over a long period of time, that stuff weathers out as you get, freezing and thawing and rainstorms and snow and all that kind of stuff. All that stuff starts to break up, and just like you see behind you, all that stuff, that material, that talus slope there is come down from the mountainside. Well, that's might have some of that gold-bearing quartz in it, and it ends up here. Gravity pulls it down to the bottom of the stream bed, and now it's concentrated here, and you get these little concentrations of gold in the bottom of the stream bed. And if there's a large enough concentration, you might start panning it out. Oh, look at that. Okay, you start panning it, you start crushing whatever ore there, whatever material might be there to get the gold out. So I don't know yet if that is actually a head frame for a shaft or if it's some other thing, because I've never seen it until just now. So we'll go down and we'll investigate that in a little bit. But if it's placer, if this is mostly placer mining, which means they're not digging shafts down into the ground or adits into the side of a hillside, everything that you're looking at or looking for is in the rock right here at the surface, in the stream bed. And then according to what Wayne found, he said that nuggets, so this is where you're going to find nuggets. He was saying that by 1938, about 20 guys were down here working these placer claims using dry wash technique. You ever see dry washing? You know what that is?
I do it for a living. I'm a prospector. I do dry
Oh,
wash.
you do? Okay, yeah. I've only seen it demonstrated a couple of times.
I'll bring my machine next time.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say...
Find us
it's
gold.
just- I don't have the patience. You know, it takes...
It's hard work.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, there's some gold. Like,
I got
you know,
18
Farm.
grams in 2 years.
Is that right? Where do you usually go? Do you have a...
Barstow, Fort Road and Copper City Road.
Oh, yeah, I know, yeah.
I own 1,000 acres. The mineral rights to 1,000 acres.
Dang. Hey, can we have a clamp out there?
Probably could.
Good. Well,
I got a nice big flash.
Oh, he's asking.
yeah, we always look into places.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, so you know the work it takes, and
It's VP, Valley Prospectors.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of them.
I'm a member of them.
You remember that group? Yeah. I remember once years ago, before I was a clamper, I went up with somebody to Summit Diggins, which is to the north and a little bit east of Randsburg, where the 395 comes down off of where Randsburg is and goes down that
Railroad
steep
tracks.
hill. Yeah, you cross the railroad tracks, and then you go head east on the tracks, and you'll end up at Summit Diggins. In fact, it was there that the guys who ended up discovering the Randsburg claims back in, 1896, 1895, were there at Summit Diggins. Anyway, it's a lot of work. It's not like, oh, we're just going to pick up nuggets off the ground. They are apparently there. These guys, according to Wayne, let's see, one nugget was worth $300, and that was in 1938 when gold was $20 an ounce. Well, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
$23.50.
now. Yeah, back then it was just
goodness.
$20, you know. Another one was found, nuggets ranging in value from $3 to $20. Gold finest average about $920 for the whole area. Source of the placer gold values in this area is an old stream channel, some 200 feet long, 200 feet wide and 9 miles long, which is the stream bed we're in now. Miners dug down through this channel until they hit bedrock, usually 70 to 115 feet down. So maybe that is a shaft down to bedrock, or they might have just scraped down to it. Gold itself was probably washed down from the Magpie or Bluebell veins located in the Inyo National Forest 3 miles south, which is, I guess, that way is south. Now, Jim just told me that there's some sort of weird hot tub thing behind this house that he's got a picture of Mark Sherman sitting in when they pre-ran the trip. So we'll check that out, check this other stuff down, and then we'll move down the canyon a little bit. I guess there's a turnaround about 1/10 of a mile down, and we'll turn around and head back up. And then we'll go out the same way we came, get back onto 168 finally, and then up towards Westgard Pass, and then up to the bristlecone trees.
Bristlecone, that's what they were. Yep.
There we go.
What's that gold?
He's got a, yeah, well, there aren't any here. Oh, so it's kind of an interesting story about these things. They only grow at the tops of these Great Basin mountain ranges. From here, they'll grow here in the Inyo and White Mountains. They'll grow in some of the Nevada ranges as far east as up around Ely. So they like the high altitudes from 9 to 11 or more thousand feet. As you can probably imagine, it's pretty rough up here in terms of winters. A lot of wind, which is why they're just they're gnarled and just weather beat. These are the oldest living creatures on the earth. Some people will argue, yeah, well, those yucca circles and that kind of stuff that you'll get some, and what is it? Aspens also will form kind of a cluster. Their DNA is all the same, but they're not the same age, so they're all descended from the same biological unit. Those things. These, however, are single organisms. These are the oldest single organisms in the world. And as I recollect from doing the history, you'll see more about them in more detail here. They're up to 5,000 years old. So if you figure the pyramids were built 2,500 years ago or so, no, excuse me, 4,500 years ago. These trees, some of these trees were already 500 years old when the aliens came to build the pyramids. Now we're talking. So it does put it in perspective. There's a couple of really old ones. There's the Methuselah Grove. There's the Shulman Grove here, which you'll learn more about. The oldest one was that they could count accurately was I think it was 4,800 years old. The reason they knew its age is because they cut it down to count the rings. It's like, what? This was in the 60s. And the Forest Service gave the researcher permission to cut it down to count the rings to see how old it was. Well, that's kind of like, cutting off your arm to see, oh yeah, my hand was healthy. It was working. Okay. Anyway, there's another one that's, there's another grove further north in the mountains. I think it's called the Patriarch Grove. And that tree is the largest of the bristlecones. We pre-ran this trip, I want to say it was when Neil Sampson was head abbot, so 5-6 years ago. And I remember we ran by here real quick, but we didn't stop into the visitor center. We went as far north as Patriarch Grove. I don't think you can go much further than that without getting permission or getting up toward that research lab. And that's a big tree. That Patriarch tree is pretty huge. But it's amazing because the soil it grows in, it's not like this. It's real coarse and rocky, like you see behind
When
you.
we were coming in that valley, we noticed that there weren't any trees in the valley. It was only up in the white strata you saw the pine trees growing.
Where these things live, yeah. So, well, let's take some time. I'd like to go in there and see what's in there. They may charge you $3. That's
And
no problem.
I also heard that ancient alien theorists believe that Adam was the one that planted those trees.
And Adam was.
Yeah.
They always say yes.
Yeah.
Adam was the first man. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So then,
Making sense.